Hi there, I'm Rick DeBrule. This week filling in for Steve Mugnante. Tyler Hoover's been doing some great junkyard crawls. I thought it was my turn. Steve, of course, is doing better, but it's going to be a while before he's back. So we're hoping you keep watching his YouTube channel and junkyard crawls, and we'll do our best filling in. Although, once again, he knows this much. The rest of us on the planet know this much about cars. Now, this week I am here at Desert Valley Auto Parts, one of their 3 locations, because I live in the Phoenix area. This was the logical place to go. And you might notice it looks a lot different than the junkyards that Steve Mugnante was crawling through. Not nearly as green, or even the one Tyler Hoover was in, because we are in the middle of nowhere. This is Black Canyon City, way north of Phoenix. This is one of their 3 junkyards. Now, you might remember Desert Valley Auto Parts from the reality TV show they had a number of years ago, like 10 or 12 years ago, called Desert Car Kings. I think they only did it for a season or 2, but Jason McClure and his family did a great job. It was a fun show to watch, and they were very gracious to let us come up and at least walk through one of their yards. I'm here in the Black Canyon City location because this is where they have an awful lot of their cars from the muscle car era, and since that's what Steve likes to talk about, what we like to show on Barrett Jackson, I thought, well, this would be the perfect place to start. So as I was walking through, this was the first car that grabbed my attention. And the reason being, it looks like just another, coupe Mustang from 1968. But I happen to notice right over here, when you look down the side of that, see that stripe? This isn't just another one. This is a GTCS, a California Special. They only made them during 1968, and it's an interesting car with an interesting history. And part of the history is the fact that you might have heard of the car Little Red. It was Carroll Shelby's personal car back in 1967. It was a 1967 coupe, just like this one, but it had been, let's say, Shelbyized, had high-performance engine, turbocharged, had a Shelby spoiler on the back, scoops on the side. One day, one of the Ford executives was touring the Shelby facility and said, "Oh, that's a really cool-looking car." And Carroll said, "Oh, here, take the keys, drive it for a while." So he drove it for a few weeks. As he was driving around the Los Angeles area, he said every place he went, people kept going, "Well, that's a really cool car. Where can I get one? How can I get one?" And of course, that began to get the wheels turning. So he went back and showed Lee Iacocca. Lee Iacocca was actually out in California. He said, "Can I have 5 minutes of your time?" He said, "Let me show you this car. It's really cool." Lee Iacocca liked the idea. So they began to come up and think, well, what could we do? How could we do a notchback version of a Shelby? Well, they started calling it the GTSC for Sport Coupe. There were some other names, the 350, that type of thing. But they began to look at the idea of doing a coupe version of a Shelby car. For a variety of reasons, never went quite as far as they thought it was going to go to. Then it began to morph. And Lee Iacocca was saying, one of our biggest markets for the Mustang was California. At that point, they were selling between 20 and 25% of all the Mustangs just in California. The dealers were saying, well, why can't we have something special? In fact, they'd already been doing something like that up in the Denver and Colorado area. So they came up with this idea, instead of having a GTSC, how about a GTCS, a GT California Special. And that's exactly what we have right here. One of the 4,100 GTCSs that were made. And it's distinctive when you see them, well, even in this condition, because of that stripe down the side. Now, what this is missing is a lot of the accessories and stuff that you would ordinarily see on a GTCS. We'll walk around and we'll show that in just a minute. Significant to talk about with the GTCS is it really was not a performance package. All it was an accessory package. It was really all about looks, and in fact you get the full range of engines. You could get the 6-cylinder, you could get one of the V8s, you can work your way all the way up to performance. But a lot of them simply had 289s or 302s, as the case may be. But it was really all about the looks and the appeal because of what they'd done to the car that made it special. So let's walk around. I'm going to dig into the VIN. I was able to figure out that this is a real deal GTCS. I'll tell you more about that, and we'll talk about the accessories, and we'll also talk about what's missing down in that engine compartment. All right, the first thing we had to do was a little VIN decoding, because that's exactly what Steve Mugnante would do. And we had to go down here and look right on the edge of the engine compartment. And there you see the VIN right there, and it starts with a star that goes 8R01C, which is what we really want to know right here. So 8R01, what that basically means is that's a 1968. It was built in the San Jose plant, and it's a coupe. as opposed to a fastback. When right off the bat, if you're looking for a GTCS, that's what you're looking for, 8R01. And in this case, that C letter means that it is also supposed to be inside that engine compartment, a 289 cubic inch engine with a 2-barrel carburetor. Now, as you can see, it's long since disappeared out of there, but that's what was supposed to be in there. As I've mentioned, it was not a performance package with the GTCS. You could get it with any engine. I think they made less than 300 of the 6 cylinders, but you could work your way up. This was the lowest of the 8-cylinder performance engines that you could get, the 289 195 horsepower. You could bump up to the 4-barrel carburetor, which was going to get you about another, I think, 25 horsepower or so. And you could work your way up through the range. But once again, this one would have started life with that. Now, what's interesting is because we've got the VIN number and because Ford saved all of its records for the VINs, we were able to get something that could help us out quite a bit. You probably have heard of Kevin Marty and the infamous Marty report. Well, we were able to get a Marty report on this particular car. And what it tells us is exactly what we want to know about this. The fact that, yes, this is a legitimate GTCS. It was built at San Jose, 289 cubic inch, 2-barrel. It's got a candy apple red paint, which, as you can see, is, well, not very candy apple at this point, but at least that's what it started off life as. It was supposed to be built on June 10th, 1968, but ultimately it was built on the 18th. Now, the interesting thing is that when they originally planned to build the GTCSs, the idea was they were going to build about 5,000 of them, and they were going to send them to California. Just one problem. It turned out that while California does have a big desire back then for Mustangs, they didn't have a massive desire for the GTCS. Instead of selling 5,000 of them in California, they ultimately only ended up selling about, well, they only built 4,100, and not all of those went to California. In fact, Phoenix was the second largest market here in Arizona for GTCSs. That's where a lot of them would end up. But this one in particular didn't end up in California. It didn't end up in Phoenix. This one went to Kansas City. Now, Kansas City has a history of Mustang, Special Mustangs, the Twister editions, but this particular GTCS actually went to California. So, or pardon me, this particular GTCS actually went to Kansas City. So, went all the way to Kansas City to come all the way back here. Now, don't know the story of what happened with this particular one. It looks like there's some like flame damage inside the engine compartment, so I'm going to guess that that's likely what happened to it. I can see more on the front. It appears that it's possibly maybe it caught fire as a result. That's how it possibly ended up here in the junkyard. But either way, it is a real deal GTCS. And then one other interesting thing that I was able to note, using the VIN number, I was able to go back through some of the GTCS registries, and I was able to find that this VIN number right here actually does correspond to a GTCS in one of the registries that was owned by someone right here in Arizona. So, not sure if he's still watching, but here is where that GTCS has ended up. All right, now let's walk around and talk about the car itself. All right, so let's walk around and take a look at what is a GTCS. Now, up front, what you would have had right here was a blacked out grille with no Mustang emblem in it. And what you would have had, well, in the beginning, I believe it started off with Marshall driving lights, so it would be right here. And then the second half of the year, I guess there were some issues with the Marshalls. They ended up going to Lucas. This is towards the end of the GTCS run, so I would have expected to see Lucas lights in here. That's where that 289 engine would have been. You can see the exhaust manifolds hanging on there, but that's just about it. You know, interesting. The interior of the engine, the underneath of this particular car, you know, very similar in many ways to the 1965-66. If you can work on a 65-66, boy, you can work on these things. 67-68, almost identical. They basically enlarged this engine compartment so they could get bigger engines in 67 and 68, which is why the car looks so much larger in this realm. One of the things you'll routinely see when you see modified or customized 1967-68s is what they'll do is they'll shave this shock tower. See, they can pull these out with these bolts right here, pull this out, redo the suspension, and that gives them even more room to put engines, bigger engines inside there. All right, as you walk your way down the side, of course, the stripes are the thing that people most notice right off the bat with GTCSs. And what it would have done, it would have come all the way back to here, and right here, there would have been a Shelby side scoop. And as you can see, it's not mounted super strong. This is the key thing right here. Let's see if we can open this up. We can slightly open it up. All that junk inside. You would have had to go through here to pull that off. Let's see if I can find the hole, because it would have been connected down through here, and that's how you connect the Shelby side scoop. Nice little piece. I can understand exactly why it's missing, because that had some value. Go all the way to the back. You can see Special right here, denoting it was a California Special. What you would have seen back here would have been a trunk that came up with a nice big spoiler on the back. And then at the very back, you would have seen not 1967 or 68 style tail lights. What you would have seen was the tail lights from a 1965 Thunderbird, the same type that were used in the Shelby, would have gone all the way across. So from the back, it had a very distinctive look. It looked like just like any other Shelby. Now, the interesting thing is, where did they get the scoop for the back? Well, basically what they did, they obviously couldn't use one off a fastback Shelby. What they did was they used one off of a convertible. So this trunk would have been from a convertible Shelby from 1968. Would have had the kick-up tail right here. Also would have had a piece right here to connect up to it. There's another couple things that would have been missing. Well, and most important, at the very front, it would have had hood locks right here. Those are the basic things that make it a GTCS. And once again, the GTCS is merely a cosmetic package. You could choose what you wanted performance-wise to figure out exactly how you wanted to do it. All right, let's take a look and see what else is inside. Door does not want to open very easily. It's got bucket seats. There we've got the steering column. Yeah, everything's, well, I won't say everything. There's a lot of things in place. And here we look on, this is the air filter cover. And yes, it says it was a 289 cubic inches. And remember, once again, this was 289 two-barrel carburetor that came in this particular one. Got our Mustang radio right there, not a radio delete, the kind that Steve is always so proud of. And you see we got a few issues right there down below. That is what we call a Fred Flintstone floorboard. But once again, it's a California Special. It was really, the accessory cost about an extra, I think it was less than $200 to get the GTCS. And then once again, from there, you would choose what it is exactly you were going to put onto it. But it was a fun car, and it's got a good following. I mean, while it doesn't have the performance of a Shelby, while it doesn't have a lot of the things that some performance people are looking for, especially if you get one that's got a 302, or even better, a 390, it becomes a pretty cool car. And so it is desirable. And there you can see what's left. Remember on the other side, I showed you how it says Special right there? Well, look what we're lacking here. You can see it says just the tail end of the California right there with Special underneath it. So obviously, the things that make this a California Special have, for the most part, been removed for it. I think I'd love to have that little Special right there. The side scoop, the striping, and for what it's worth, you can recreate a GTCS very easily because it doesn't take a lot. You just get yourself a coupe, get yourself the trunk lid with the spoiler on it. I've seen those. I think they retail in the range of, say, $700 or so. And once again, you might have to do some work. Well, you will have to do some work to get them just right. The California Special, I don't know how much that would cost. The striping kit, the Shelby side scoops, the hood locks, the lights up front. It's not going to be a ridiculous amount of money to make it look like a GTCS. Now, the thing about a GTCS is, it's not worth a massive amount of money. It's not like a Shelby. Get a Shelby, you can make a big investment. You can buy it in this condition, do all the work to get it up to, better condition, and there's a big return. The GTCSs generally are going to sell in the range of maybe $35,000 to $50,000. And you will notice this one's for sale. $2,200 can get you a shell, shall we say, of a GTCS. But it does have potential. It's not rusty. It's I think it needs an awful lot of work. But if you were one of those guys who was willing to put in the time and do patience, and once again, you can buy front clips, rear clips. You can buy all kinds of stuff to put this back into almost new condition. We got the rear seat back here. Anything else missing? Well, once again, just about everything's missing. There we see the instrument cluster down there on its upside down location. Cool car, GTCS, 4,100 of these made, and I did mention the fact that there was what was called a High Country Special edition. Now the High Country Special was done in the Colorado area, and they actually started making them in 1966, 67, and essentially it was just a Mustang with some badging on it. In 1968, they said, well, wait a minute, this is cool what the California folks are getting. Maybe we could get something like that. And so they essentially had a GTCS with all of this package on it, and it had a High Country Special sticker on it as well. So it was not a California Special, it was a High Country Special, officially being sold up in the Denver area. Just a few hundred of those, I think, were sold. But once again, the GTCS, about 4,100 of these made. Very cool car, a lot of fun. Just to look at, it's got a strong following. Everybody who knows these, my good buddy Kevin Riggs has owned a couple of these. He's really a big fan of them, and I can see why. Because once again, you get a lot of appearance. People think it's a performance car, and if you're lucky, you've got the performance engine. And if not, swap out that that 289 that's only got 195 horsepower, or even better, swap out the 6-cylinder engine if that's what it came with, and put in something that has a lot more performance. Now, one thing I see more than I would expect of a car here in Arizona is rust. As you look around, whether it's on the fender wells or some of the other places, there's more rust than I would have anticipated seeing on an Arizona car. Of course, the fact that this car started its life in Kansas City might explain exactly why that is. Having said that, up front, it's not horrible. It just does need some stuff that has to be replaced. But overall, the car is not bad. One interesting thing when I look inside, and I see this is the grille right here. But what's different about the grille, as I move the steering column out of the way, it's got the horse in the corral right there, which I believe that a GTCS does not have the horse in the corral. It's got a blacked out grille, and it would have had the fog lights up front, or the driving lights up front. So it is a little bit different. But as you can see, it's still pretty cool. Now, the original Little Red was in 1967. By the time they got this thing into production, it was in 1968. Just a fun car, a lot of interesting facts about it. Once again, only about 4,100 of these made on the original production run. So that's today's Junkyard Crawl. Remember, like this if you like the channel. Make sure you subscribe. I think Steve's up over 130, maybe 140,000 subscribers right now. So help Steve out, become a subscriber, and watch more of the Junkyard Crawls that we've got here on the channel. Because trust me, Steve already has hundreds of them that he's done. And with all the knowledge he's got up here, it's amazing what you can learn.